Hello, everyone. We just want to first and foremost thank you very much for all of your questions. The Q&A podcast did exceptionally well over the bank holiday weekend. And as Michael was just saying to me before we came on air here, we're still getting more of them.
Yeah, I got 2 in the last couple of days. So it's great. I really enjoy answering all the questions. So keep them coming. And there will be more of those pods in the coming weeks. We're going to stagger them out for a few weeks.
Yeah, we're kind of going to take the time to actually answer those questions properly and not rush those podcasts because, in fairness, some people have some very thoughtful and interesting questions that do require some research. But we still have the day job to do, and there have been a lot of incidents over the course of the bank holiday weekend, very tragic incidents that we want to tell you about that we've been reporting on.
Yes, including one knife murder, which we're going to talk about.
Yes, so I'm going to defer to you a little bit because you were on yesterday. I did hear a bit of information on this, but I will defer to you for some of the more details about this that we've learned since. But this horrendous incident, which occurred in Dublin city centre in the early hours of Monday morning, bank holiday Monday morning, on Grafton Street, well, really Clarendon Street, where this man, his name is. Well, I'll let you say all of that, but he is originally from Nigeria and he was living in the dock, and he passed away after this incident at a nightclub, the Bewley's nightclub there. People will know it on Grafton Street. Tell us a bit about this, Mick.
Yeah, so his name is Qayyum Balogun. He's a Nigerian. I understand he's a member of the Muslim faith. So he has been, I think he was born in Nigeria, but has spent a large portion or most of his life in Dundalk in County Louth. Our understanding is he is a student, or he was a student at Maynooth University, and he also had this part-time job. I don't know what this DJ or promoting something in that field, but you're right. He was at a gig in Bewley's on Grafton Street. Now I think trouble started outside the club. Guards got the notification just before 3 a.m. I think at about 2:58. And essentially what happened was there was a large row on Grafton Street. Mr. Balogun was stabbed once in the arm, and he ran for his life, essentially, away from Grafton Street over towards Clarendon Street. And there's an alleyway called Johnson's Court, which connects Clarendon Street to Grafton Street. He appears to have run down Johnson's Court, got to the end of Johnson's Court, which brings him onto Clarendon Street, as I said. He turned left, I was at the scene on Monday, he maybe got 6 or 7 feet when he was cornered and attacked again. Now, as I say, he had one stab wound at this stage in the arm. When his attacker or attackers cornered him on Clarendon Street, and he was stabbed twice more, once in the chest and once in the torso or side, that sort of area, and one of those injuries proved fatal. Now, as I say, Gardaí were notified at just before 3 a.m. You'll know that there is this high visibility patrols that Assistant Commissioner, now Deputy Commissioner Paul Cleary, brought into Dublin last year, just before he was made Deputy Commissioner. So it's more Gardaí on the beat and on the street. Now, Gardaí were alerted to this very quickly. They got there within, I think, 3 minutes. And the officers who went to the scene realised how seriously injured Mr. Balogun was and performed CPR on him before paramedics arrived in the scene. He was then rushed to St. James's Hospital, where unfortunately he died after about 90 minutes, so at around 20 past 4:30. Terrible tragedy for the family. His mother is in Dundalk. His father, at the time of the death, was in Lagos in Nigeria, and he flew home via Cairo on Monday evening, and he's due to arrive in Dundalk sometime today. Terrible, terrible shock for the whole family.
What a horrendous incident. And people have probably read or seen that there was an event on there in Bewley's. People remember, like, Bewley's really is kind of it's a cafe, but now at night time there are actually there's a nightclub there, and there are events actually held on it. And this particular event, it was an artist, famous Pluto, was performing, and Qayyum was attending that, as were a number of his friends. I'd heard that there were, I think you've alluded to it, but there were numerous people involved in this. I mean, you're talking maybe upwards of 20 people involved in this whole incident.
Yeah, it seems they've been. I don't know what Mr. Balogun's role was. I mean, we just don't know. Gardaí are trying to get to the bottom of this, but there was a fight, and now Mr. Balogun was injured initially in this. We also know that a woman was stabbed in the leg in this. Now, that
Jesus.
woman was just completely in the wrong place at the wrong time. I don't think she had any connection to Mr. Balogun, and she wasn't involved in the row. So she lives in South County Dublin. So she was very lucky as well. So look, it's really horrible for the Balogun family and for that lady and for all the people who were traumatised there, who went out for a night, and this happened. Just shocking, really, to think that people can go out for an evening and then something really horrible like this happens.
Well, it seems as though, and I mean, obviously that's up to Gardaí to investigate, but it seems as though the fact that he sort of escaped and ran for his life, and that he was then hunted down and attacked further, that whoever wanted to attack him, deliberately targeted him.
Well, say if there had been the other scenario, if it had just been one incident where he received a single stab wound in a fight, maybe he got caught up in it, whatever, and there was one stab wound, and that, I mean, there are plenty of cases where people die after one stab wound, but the fact that it appears that Mr. Balogun was stabbed once, ran, and then was hunted down by one, maybe two, maybe three people, and effectively stabbed to death around the corner, that's a real measure of intent, isn't it? That's, the definition of murder is not only to kill, but to intend to cause serious harm to, knowing that, that he could die. So, it's a very, very serious investigation now by Gardaí. One thing that will help them, anybody who knows Clarendon Street and Grafton Street, and like even, Duke Street, Coppinger Row, there were 4 or 5 streets. There was a large part of South Central Dublin was sealed off. That area, it's a business heart, it's a commercial heart, it's a tourist heart. So the place is bristling with CCTV cameras. So I would imagine that Gardaí have a really strong picture of what happened, but they're still hoping, for other witnesses to come forward. Maybe people were in the area who may have their own camera phones and that sort of thing. So look, I would say that there will be no shortage of footage for Gardaí to help them in their investigation.
Yeah, now there has been a lot of commentary about the nature of this incident, and there has been a statement released by the Blackened Irish organisation about the death of Qayyum Balogun. They extended their sympathies to his family and said his life has been taken too soon. And they said that this incident comes when the country has witnessed a number of serious violent incidents and loss of lives. The rise in violence we are seeing is deeply concerning and must be condemned in the strongest possible terms. No family should have to receive the phone call that their child or friend is not coming home. So, I mean, they're talking about this from a racial perspective, and that's, their right as an organisation to speak on that. There is an awful lot of commentary, regarding this event, and, without maybe necessarily identifying other there have been other incidents in the past at club night events. So there is concern. Is this really a one-off, or are these types of violent incidences happening at particular events? That's the commentary that's going on.
Well, there are dozens, if not hundreds, of events a week. And I can think of, I know we won't go into this other incident as it's sub judice, but I was maybe, in the last 2 years, this is the second incident there have been. So just to give a bit of perspective, 99.99% of all these incidents, any club in Dublin, pub, whatever, disco, people don't, these things don't happen. But it's just very worrying that, and I don't know, we don't know what happened, but guards are still trying to get to the bottom of it, but somebody brought a knife onto Grafton Street in a very built-up area, and that is really worrying. That at least one person thought, okay, let's bring a knife here. I just find that really, really troubling. For any... for society, for any young kids, it's really, really, really troubling, I find.
Yeah, and I think we can all agree on that. I mean, the fact that, young kids really are out trying to enjoy a night out, and somebody decided, as you said, to bring a weapon to that event, says that they were prepared to use violence. And then the fact that he was hunted down and killed shows clear intent to take that severe action and to take his life. There is a murder investigation, is that right? Has it been launched as such?
I think they're waiting on the post-mortem. I think that's probably going to be today, but I mean, it is pretty clear Mr. Balogun This is a murder. There's absolutely no doubt about that. He was stabbed to death, the poor man. So no, there will be a full murder inquiry. And just, I think it's a really important point that if, as we believe, are led to believe that the fatal wound was caused after he was chased, then you just hit the nail on the head there, Paul, because this is intent, what they would call mens rea in court, and that's going to lead to a very serious charge.
A horrendous incident, and sadly, it's just one of two incidents that we are aware of at this point that occurred over the bank holiday weekend. People may have read this tragic story of a young man who died after getting into the River Liffey in the Chaplizod area of Dublin. But there's a bit more to the story. This incident began actually at the War Memorial Gardens in Island Bridge. And so the suspicion is that there was a bit of a row that happened there. And this young man, Thomas Griffin is his name, 32 years of age, sadly got caught up in this row. And I'm told that the suspicion is that he was slashed a number of times in the face and on his body. So in an attempt to evade his attackers, he fled and actually got into the River Liffey, where he then got out of the river around the Chaplizod Road area and was there on the roadside in a very, very bad way. Gardaí and emergency services attended the scene. He was rushed to James's Hospital, where he subsequently was declared dead.
That's the same hospital as Mr. Balogun.
Yeah. Coincidentally, actually,
just probably 24 hours beforehand.
Now, this is a complex incident. It's not maybe as straightforward as even it may sound. There is obviously an ongoing investigation, and similar to this incident in Grafton Street, Gardaí are awaiting the results of a post-mortem examination to determine the course of the investigation. But I'm told that there are concerns about the victim's, let's say, physical state at the time, and that there may be a concern that he may have died from other causes, shall we say?
Do I get the sense that there may have been, is it underlying health difficulties for him?
Yes. That there's talk of that. Now, in fairness, you could argue, and I don't think anyone necessarily would disagree. I mean, would that have come on otherwise? I mean, he obviously was fleeing a very serious assault, got into a river. So they have to determine the exact cause of death, and that'll determine whether the investigation is one type of investigation or another. But certainly, I think there will be people here who are being sought for assault, at the very least. But he did die. He did lose his life post this incident, and so that obviously escalates it significantly. But the Gardaí, people will kind of go, why haven't they launched a murder investigation? They will be led by the post-mortem and other factors. And so if the post-mortem comes back and says he died of, say, what's deemed to be natural causes or something like that, well, that complicates things. That doesn't mean that it couldn't still be escalated, but it just complicates the investigation significantly.
I wonder, would the possibility be of manslaughter if the death was brought on perhaps by going into the water to get away from people who were attacking him? He must have been really terrified. Liffey's obviously a very big river.
And I think, in fairness, you have to make that argument. I think even just any reasonable person will say, well, I mean, he wouldn't have died had he not had to get in a river anyway and flee. So this is a complicated investigation for Gardaí and Ballyfermot Garda Station who are investigating it. There's another kind of tragic aspect to this, and it's mad how often this happens, Mick, isn't it? How many times we write a story and then you find out that another family member had already, died in similar circumstances. His brother, James Griffin, actually died, was murdered back in 2014, the 16th of November 2014, Jay Griffin. And he was from Ballyfermot, and he was stabbed to death at a club night, actually, in the Celtic Gladiators Private Members Club on that date, the 16th of November 2014. He received multiple stab wounds, his inquest heard, to his neck, torso and arm before his attackers actually fled the scene in a taxi. And that murder remains unsolved to this day.
I was listening to RTU on the way home today, and they said that Thomas, he would have been a very talented boxer in his
Yes.
youth, and he was also a very talented jockey.
I wasn't aware about the jockey element. Yeah, no,
Mm.
but I was told that he did box. He was trained in St Matthew's Boxing Club in Ballyfermot, and the professional boxer Luke Keeler actually knew him very, very well. I spoke to Luke, and he actually sent me a tribute. He said that Thomas was one of the most naturally talented young boxers to come out of Ballyfermot and St Matthew's Boxing Club. He was an underage Irish champion with huge ability and potential. As old coach Stephen Marr would say, he had bags of heart, and even though he drifted away from the sport, that never left him. My thoughts and prayers are with his family and friends at this heartbreaking time.
So you're quite right, Paul. The number of stories that we do where you do a bit of research and you realise that another family member has died in traumatic circumstances. Some families are just so unlucky.
Yeah, and I like it. It's not the first time, and it won't be the last. I think that I hear about a tragedy, and then as it turns out, the family had already suffered another tragedy. It just seems some people have terrible, terrible luck.
Terrible.
I want to ask you about a court case that you were at today. I'm just going to let you have the floor. Tell us a bit about this.
Okay, this case first emerged on Saturday. Our colleague Tom Chute was at Dublin District Court. A civil servant called Yevgen McKeith, who is a naturalised Irish citizen. He was born in Ukraine, naturalised Irish citizen, and he appeared in the Dublin District Court on Saturday. Now, he's charged under the Theft and Fraud Act, but the court heard that this was an operation by the Garda Special Detective Unit, who carry out very serious investigations, obviously. And the court heard allegations that he's an IT worker in a government department. Now, the court has barred media from saying what department Mr. McKeith works in, his home address, and also the Foreign Intelligence Agency, which I will mention in a minute. But the allegation was, it was alleged in court that Gardaí believed that this man had been providing secret Irish government information to a foreign intelligence service. Now, on Saturday, when he appeared in court for the first time, he was refused bail. There was a contested bail hearing, and the Special Detective Unit Sergeant said that Mr. McKeith, who has changed his name by deed poll, was arrested at Dublin Airport last Thursday. He had more than €5,000 on him, and he was heading to Turkey for onward travel to another country, but he had a one-way ticket. So he has been remanded in custody. He was in custody since last Saturday. I was in Clover Hill District Court, which is a remand court in West Dublin, beside Clover Hill Prison.
Right next to the prison.
Now, yeah, right next door to it. It's part of the same complex. Now, Mr. McKeith appeared via video link today. The case lasted less than a minute, so he was further remanded in custody because it was adjourned until the 30th of June for DPP's directions, because the court heard that although he is charged under the Theft and Fraud Act, the Special Detective Unit Detective Sergeant said it is possible that there may be charges under the Official Secrets Act. So the Hillsdon, very, very short case today. The case was put back to the 30th of June, but the court did hear that Mr. McKeith is going to go to the High Court. He is in the process of going to the High Court seeking bail. So essentially what happened was on Saturday he was refused bail by the District Court. So when the District Court refuses bail, the person's recourse is to go to the High Court to seek bail, and that is what is happening now. So that will be for a High Court judge to decide in the coming days or weeks. But the case will be back on the 30th of June when there will be DPP's directions on what happens next.
Okay, and as we often get given out to for explaining this, but we should explain, because that is a live court case, I can't ask you any more questions really about it other than you can say what you heard in court.
I've just given you a contemporaneous court report.
Yeah. Lastly, just want to bring up Joe O'Reilly, infamous wife killer. People will know that he is serving a life sentence for the murder of his wife Rachel, October 4th, 2004. He has been in jail since 2007, so next year will be 20 years since he was jailed. He is once again trying for parole. This is he tried in 2024 and he's going to try again this year. And look, he would have a better chance this time around. There's no two ways about it. He's coming, towards 20 years. The average you would spend for a life sentence is 21 years. But as we'll probably talk about, there are other reasons why, you could argue he's going to stay a lot longer in. But the development over the weekend, Emma McMenemy wrote a story, which we published in other papers, published that Joe O'Reilly had completed a business course, an open university degree in the Midlands prison where he is serving his sentence. And there was a bit of a ceremony and people were invited along and that. Just in kind of doing my own homework about this, there was a wider graduation ceremony that, multiple prisoners were at, including Joe O'Reilly. But yeah, there's a mixed reaction to someone like him being able to access a university course in the first place, let alone graduate.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on that? My thoughts are prison is a tremendous punishment in itself because your liberty is restricted. Right, you and I have both been in prison on visits. And can you imagine being in your cell? It could be 23 hours a day. So, and there's also the question of rehabilitation. What do we do with prisoners? Do we just lock them up and that's it? Or do we say, well, you are being punished. There's always an element of punishment, but is there an element of rehabilitation where because it is inevitable that Mr. O'Reilly will one day get out?
Yes.
And what do we do then? What does society do then?
That is a complex question because, as you say, what is the duty of a prison? I suppose prisons now are much more focused towards rehabilitation, and part of that is education. And certainly I think if we were speaking to any prison governor here or anyone involved in the prison service, they would tell you and be able to quote you even stats that have proven that when people are released and they've been educated and so on, they don't repeat, that there aren't that many repeat offenders when they engage with the system. So that clearly, at least statistically, proves that kind of model works. And they're not wanting people to return to prison. Ultimately, they want them to go on and quote unquote better themselves. But at what point do you draw the line, I suppose, and say, well, look, I mean, this person is you can't rehabilitate a psychopath or a murderer, even someone who took his wife's life, planned that murder, and has never admitted it to this day.
That's the key word, Paul. Most murders, or many murders, I don't have the stats, but I would anticipate a majority of murders are not necessarily planned. I've covered the case. I mean, I still remember it. That murder was planned for weeks, maybe months. And that is really, really rare because in most murders, somebody loses their head and decides to inflict serious pain on somebody and they die. And so there's that whole question of intent. But this fella intended to kill his wife. He planned to kill his wife and he killed his wife. And, so the one thing I always remember when we're talking about O'Reilly is I remember maybe 2008, the late Brian Lenihan, who's best known for being finance minister, but before that he was justice minister. And we were at an event with him. It must have been shortly after the hearing because Mr. Lenihan, as well as being a TD, he was a barrister, right? And so he was Minister for Justice. And I remember him telling us, sitting there saying, Joe O'Reilly will do 20 years. And now that was quite rare back in the day. We now know that I think it's about 21 years on average. But he was right, because I can't see O'Reilly getting out between now and June next year when he'd have done his 20 years.
No, but I do think maybe the next logical step, so to speak, would be, they'll move him to an open facility. So they'll move him to Shelton Abbey or Loughlin House. And that's certainly something I'm sure that he would be looking to do in the next year or two. Maybe the parole board will try him out on that now that he's done his degree. That's the next sort of stage. Then they start getting out on day release. And maybe you're talking then 25 years or so, you'd be saying there's a possibility they might let someone like him out. But still, the key thing usually that goes in your favour towards getting out is admission, remorse for what you've done. And as far as we are aware, Joe O'Reilly's never admitted what he has done.
And it's funny you mentioned 25 years. I think that's how long roughly Malcolm MacArthur served. And it's just remarkable how sort of time repeats itself, because I can remember when I started down here maybe around well, it was 2002 maybe, MacArthur had been in for more than 20 years, and that was regarded, all the old-time journalists were looking back on, I remember doing this story. Now, I'm an
Mm.
old-time journalist, and I'm looking back on, I remember covering the Joe O'Reilly trial and the murder of Rachel in October 2004. It was just one of those real standout moments in my career, in most Irish crime reporters' career, because of things like the Late Late Show, and just the public fascination with that
Yeah,
case was off the scale. And you know what? The guards got justice for
they
Rachel.
did.
Fantastic investigation.
People will never forget it. I interviewed Rose Callally, who is the mother
Mm.
of Rachel Callally, and we featured the interview in was it yesterday's paper? Yeah, yesterday's paper. And I spoke to her about this development, the fact that Joe had completed this particular course, and she actually said, "If I'm being honest in my heart, I'm delighted for him that he can get what he likes. I don't begrudge him anything that he has, but I do begrudge him his freedom." That's the only thing. I don't care what happens, and if he has a world famous job inside the prison, once he doesn't have his freedom. So that's her
See,
opinion on it.
do you know that's very strong, because I was actually just thinking about something the other night, and I was going, if you take somebody's life, right, deliberately in a murder,
Mm.
is 20 years enough? That person is dead. That person will never come back. The murderer can do, I'll do 20 years and then I'll come out and I'll start again. Is
Mm.
that fair?
No, it's I mean, look, you got to balance that with, and the parole board do balance that with how the victim's family are coping, and they take their input into account. Rose Callally and the other members of the Callally family will have an opportunity to sit with the parole board and tell them their reasons why they don't think Joe should get out. I'm particularly struck by, Rose said to me, and she says to me every time I interview her, that she can still, as clear as day, remember finding her daughter. Joe left Rachel there for Rose to find in the bedroom. She'll never forget the sight of finding her daughter dead on the ground. That's still burned into her brain to this day. She has to live with that for the rest of her life. Joe gets to go out and have another chance. Is that really fair? So she doesn't think that's fair. She says, as long as she's alive, she says, she'll continue to fight it. People may remember that her husband Jim, who also fought big time to keep Joe behind bars, he actually passed away there over 2 years ago. And she actually said to me that when Jim died, she had told herself, "I think I'm just going to let it go now," because she didn't want to have that kind of anger in her anymore. But then she said she still felt that fire in her belly, I suppose, and she says she will continue to fight to keep Joe behind bars for as long as she is alive.
See, but look, I don't have the answers, and I suppose maybe we're metropolitan elites, woolly
Mm.
liberals, about people, need to be rehabilitated, and necessarily locking people up for life. But it just struck me, somebody was murdered, and the killer did 20 years. That person's not coming back, and the killer can walk out after probably two decades behind bars. How can
Mm.
any family find that fair?
I probably mentioned this before, but it's reminding me of, I remember doorstepping a wife killer. His name was Anton Mulder, and
Yeah, yeah, I
I
know.
approached him down in Wicklow after he'd been released. And I'll never forget that interview, because he looked at me dead in the eye and he said that he would rather be back in prison. So these guys aren't even necessarily in a rush to get out either, or when they do get
Yeah.
out, they get hit with reality, which is that they're shunned by society. And in reality, they had a happier and better life in prison. And maybe that's something Joe O'Reilly would have to consider. He would be a pariah for the rest of his life. He certainly wouldn't be able to live in Ireland. And I think as a convicted killer serving a life sentence, he'd have no choice but to live in Ireland. He won't be able to leave. So maybe being in prison is a bit better than being out.
And the other point is, obviously, a life sentence never ends. You are released on a license, so you are serving the rest of your sentence in the community. And if you make any transgressions, you can be brought back.
Sent straight back.
So
Yeah.
it's not what they call a determinate sentence, that once you've done your time, you've done your time. You are a life sentence prisoner forever. But it's just that simple. You're lying in bed thinking it and going, how's that fair? No matter how much time they do, will that make up? Will 30 years make up for a family never seeing their loved one again?
Yeah. Yeah, I wonder about that too, to be honest. I think there are a lot of different types of people that can be rehabilitated, but how do you rehabilitate somebody who was that calculated, that cunning, that evil? Yeah.
And Paul, and that's a really important point, that he's never admitted his guilt. And you're right, how calculated it was, how predetermined it was. It wasn't a row, as we've covered plenty of femicide cases where the husband kills the wife during a row. This was, and there may have been coercive control, I'm not minimizing any of that, I'm just saying that this was a carefully choreographed and planned murder, even to the extent that you're quite right, because I remember this, he engineered it, that Mrs. Callally would find Rachel's body. I mean, how that's veering on evil.
Oh, it's completely evil, and I think he got some sort of sick pleasure out of that, And the Callys have often recounted the story of how Joe showed them around the house and how he reenacted what he thought the murderer, who he claimed was some sort of intruder, how he might have done it. And again, he was doing that to. I remember Jim saying to me before, his eyes were bulging out of his head. He did that to sort of, get a bit of a kick. So that'll tell you the kind of person he is.
And somebody reminded me of you do so many stories about O'Reilly over the years. Somebody reminded me of a story I did with Pat Murray, who was the retired detective inspector. He was detective sergeant who cracked the case with others over O'Reilly. He arrested Joe O'Reilly and he interviewed him and all that sort of stuff. Pat wrote a book and we interviewed him. Mick O'Neill and I interviewed him. Mick was very close to Pat Murray. But I always remember Pat Murray said that there is a suspicion that Joe O'Reilly wore. There was a Darth Vader costume missing from the house. Mm-hmm. And there was always that thing about, did he wear that to carry out that murder? Because it was never found.
This is just, it's hard to even
it's what he did, I find depraved. Really, really depraved. Just the whole planning and everything. So he is, I know we use the word a lot, he is an infamous murderer. There's no doubt about that.
Well, it'll be a brave parole board that releases him, and they will have the opportunity to sit down with him, I think, later this year. But I think the next step in the process will be open prison, and I wouldn't be surprised if we're hearing that that's the next development for him. So we'll keep an eye on it.
Yeah, and Rachel is dead and never coming back. And if he has his open prison, he can effectively, you can explain this, okay, you're a prisoner, but it's open because you can go and come as you please, really, can't you?
Yeah, I mean, like, if it's open grounds, you can play golf on it, lots of different activities. You have your own dorm, but it's not a prison cell as such. You have relative freedom.
You can leave, can't you?
You can get opportunities to get day release, yes. So, yeah, he has all of that ahead of him. That's not really prison. It's still, restricting him, but... I still think it'd be a brave person. It's not a Minister for Justice necessarily now, as a parole board independently appointed that'll decide this. But I still think it'd be a brave person who rubber stamps that and says, right, you can get out, Joe. I just can't see it happening.
Terrible case. I often think about Rachel, actually, and Rose. Rose is a lady, and poor Jim.
Wonderful person, she really is.
Mr. Callally, look, we've spoken to plenty of parents and loved ones of victims. Mr. Callally was devastated by Rachel's murder.
Yeah.
I mean, devastated.
He was. And, I can't imagine. His loss was very difficult. And I know they lost their daughter Anne as well, to cancer. So they've had a tough go of it.
Yeah.
Right.
Shocking.
Mick, shall we leave it there?
Yes.
Okay. Thanks, everybody. And we'll be back to you later in the week.
And don't forget to, what do we have to say? Share, and subscribe. Is it?
Like, share and subscribe on the Irish Mirror channel, and we also have our kind of growing separate Shattered Lives podcast channel, which is at Shattered Lives Pod, all one word, on YouTube. Please subscribe to that channel for more updates. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.